Thank you for joining us and welcome to the 9th Community Wellness Roundtable, the third of our 4-part ethics in research series called Know Better, Do Better. It happens every Tuesday in September, and we have a playlist on our RCMI YouTube page where you can view our other wellness conversations about COVID and monkeypox. This roundtable is being recorded and live streamed on our Facebook page. Good evening, I'm Karen Parker. I'm Project Coordinator for Community Engagement of the RCMI program at Howard University College of Medicine. For those of you who don't know, RCMI stands for Research Centers in Minority Institutions. I'm joined this evening by my colleagues, Kristen and Elisha. Elisha is going to share a little bit about how and why we do what we do. Over to you, Elisha.
Thank you so much, Karen, and good evening, everyone. My name is Elisha Barrientos. I am the Community Engagement Specialist on our team. The RCMI program focuses on enhancing and developing necessary research infrastructure that ensures Howard University's ability to contribute to the resolution of diseases that disproportionately affect disadvantaged and minority populations. Our group, the Community Engagement Core's primary goal is to ensure that RCMI-supported research addresses the needs and interests of the local community. To achieve this, we partner with local community organizations to address health-related concerns, promote community participation in research, and partnership with researchers in study design and execution, as well as ensure research findings are shared with relevant communities. So tonight's conversation with you is very critical to our work. This core is led by Dr. Carla Williams. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Elisha. So for those of you who are just now joining us, tonight is the third installment of our series of 4. We are talking about research in this series, the framework that we have in place to protect research participants, the various types of research, and we're also going to hear from people who are directly involved in research trials and how it impacted them. Tonight, we are going to start with Ms. Priscilla Adler, whom you met last week, and Dr. Carla Williams, who is also our lead for the RCMI CEC core. Just as a bit of a recap, last week, our topic was entitled Do the Right Thing. We had a bit of history from Dr. Shanice Hudson of the Hood Medicine Initiative, where she explained the various injustices that we as Black and Brown communities experienced in the past in the name of research and medical advancement. We also heard from Ms. Veronica Robinson of Gila 100. She is the great-granddaughter of Henrietta Lacks, and she talked about her family's story and how they were able to pivot and reclaim their own legacy. And we also heard from Ms. Priscilla Adler, who spoke a bit about research protections, and she will kind of give us the on-ramp to this evening's discussion. And with that, I hand it over to Ms. Adler.
Thank you very much, Karen. I'm glad to be here and welcome any questions anyone may have. I just want to let people know that we do have protections out there. It took a long time coming to where we are today. A lot of bumps in the road, but I believe that we have a really good system in place. And one of the biggest protections is our Institutional Review Board, or IRB. It's a group of community members and scientists that reviews and approves clinical research studies. But they are very, very informed about the studies, and they want to make sure that they are safe for the participants. One of the biggest things we look at is the safety and how we're going to work with the risks and benefits of the study. the IRB is really critical to protecting the research participants. This group of community members is actually made up of 5 members, minimum of 5 members, and they have a community member, they have scientists, and they are required to have a non-scientist. A lot of times it's a clergyman or a lawyer from the community that serves on the board. We also have research participant advocates. Not every institution has them, but at the Howard University and the GUCS program, we have several who will come in. They're not affiliated with the research team. They're objective individuals who will help with the informed consent process and help with the navigation of the participants through the research study and answer any questions that the participants may not understand. We also have stiff penalties for not adhering to these regulations. Some of these are civil, some of them are criminal penalties assessed by the for noncompliance with the regulations. Those who conduct clinical research are required to assure compliance with the federal regulations. And when they don't, they are fined heavily. Some significant fines were levied on Johns Hopkins a couple of years ago, I think it was in the 1990s, for not adhering to the informed consent process. And the informed consent process is critical for the participants' understanding of the entire study, what they're getting into, what risks they may have, what benefits they may receive. And so I think it's really important to know that we have protections and we need to ask questions. We need to constantly talk to the researchers if we have any questions and say, look, how is this going to benefit me? What risks are there involved? So if I could have the next slide. One of the other things which I was going to talk about was the bench to bedside research that we do in many of our institutions, Howard, Georgetown, MedStar, Inova, and Dr. Sandoval's Research Center. What we need to do is we need to go from bench to bedside. We need to prove that these are relatively safe investigational products in the bench side, and then we need to move them into the human. And once they have been proven fairly safe, preclinical, we put them in people. And when we put them in humans, that's where the informed consent process comes in. That's where the whole research side comes in with the human subjects and the IRB. And the simplest form, conducting translational research, involves first conducting basic experiments in the lab or at the bench. Next comes preclinical with the animals. And then we have finally the clinical studies in the humans, which help to move a research concept to bedside. However, we need to make sure that those drugs are going to be relevant to the community setting. Are they going to work in the community? Are they going to have too many side effects that people aren't going to use them? We need to really make sure that the community is on board with these products and that they will use them. So that's part of the bench to bedside that we need to look at. So if I could, I think that's all I am talking about. Karen, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Adler. I'm just going to check in with our guests and see if there are any questions from your wonderful synopsis. I thought that was really helpful. Thank you.
I'm here for any questions that people may have. I'm a true advocate for research. I feel very strongly about it and the need for people to participate, and from the community especially. We need to hear that.
Agreed. Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, for those of you who are just joining us, our topic this evening is specifically, what is research and why should we participate? I now give you, as we just heard from Ms. Adler, I will now give you Dr. Carla Williams, who is here at Howard University College of Medicine. She's one of our associate professors, as well as interim director of our cancer center. And she's going to speak with us about exactly what research is. Over to you, Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everyone. And let me also extend my thanks for joining us this evening. So I just have a couple of points that I was asked to cover on this topic, and you can see the question there. And research can be defined a lot of ways, and it depends on who's talking and what they really want to know. The way that I think of research is that the goal of research is to get the best possible picture of the most accurate answer to a question. To get the best possible picture of the most accurate answer to a question. And the reason I define it like that and say a picture is that most of our research questions cannot be answered with a yes or a no or a good or a bad. It's really complex, especially as we're talking about research related to people and our real lives and the complexities of our real lives. And so the real goal of research today, as research has evolved and we are seeing more and more and recognizing more and more the importance of recognizing people's diversity in their lives, how they live, their health history, their family history, and so many other factors, we really have to try to create a picture of what is going to be the best answer to any particular question for the majority of people. And that doesn't mean that it's always going to be the right and best answer for any individual, but research is trying to get to that point where we have the best, most accurate answer that we can for the widest and largest group of individuals. So you see here a couple of anecdotes that we can think about when we ask this question, what is research? And a few people have brought up a question that you see here on your screen. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? And the idea is that, yeah, that's a question. That's a question that many years ago was asked on television commercials. And we could even do a mini research study right now, because if you are of a certain age, and maybe only a few of us on the call are of that age, you know the answer to the question based on what was in the commercial. So I could ask you to put your answer to that question in the chat if you even know what a Tootsie Pop is. Some people may not even know. But if you know what a Tootsie Pop is, you know, what is the answer to that question? How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? Or you can, if you feel free to join in this little activity, you can pop your number in the chat. Is it 100? Is it 50? Is it 1,000? Is it 4? But again, if you are of a certain age, you know what the answer to that question is because you heard it on a commercial, you know, dozens of times in a given month, if you watch television the way I did as a kid. And so that tells us something. It tells us that part of the answer is about our experiences. And so we have to take that into account when we're thinking about what is research and what are we trying to accomplish. And when I said that definition about we want to get the most accurate answer, that's really what we're trying to do with the research. We want it has to be a systematic approach. It has to be a way to make sure that we have confidence that we're getting the best possible answer. And so I see there are some Gen Xers on the call. I see a lot of people putting in 3. If you remember the commercial that the owl takes the Tootsie Pop and licks it 3 times and bites it to the center, and the answer is 3. And we know that that's probably not accurate. So what you see on the other side of the slide is that some students across a few different academic institutions probably didn't have a lot to do with their time. So there have actually been research studies to try to answer this question. And what's the difference between the owl giving the kid the answer based on the owl's personal experience in this anecdote, based on one person's experience versus these students trying to do research projects with all type of technology to try to get a more accurate answer? And the difference there is that it's that systematic process. It's a way for us to take out as many of the things that could influence the answer that would not really be relevant and try to get rid of as much of that, what we call noise, as possible. We want to get to the cleanest, what we call most pure answer to the question so that we can have confidence that that is actually the right and the best and most objective and accurate answer. And so that's really the goal of research. I don't know that I clearly defined it, but I want to really focus on what is the goal. And the goal is to really get to the best answer for the most people possible. And Ms. Adler already covered a lot of this, so I'm going to really just zoom to the right-hand side of the chart, because she talked about research that happens in a lab. We all think about that, things that happen with patients, either in the clinic or with the hospital. But other important roles of research and types of research that get done happen outside of hospital settings, outside of laboratory settings, because we want to answer these questions. And as you can see on the slide, each of these phases of research have questions that we're trying to answer. So at the later phases, and I think Priscilla touched on this, we want to make sure that whatever answers we got to questions about how to improve human health can really be delivered reliably. They can be delivered in a way that everybody is going to get the best possible experience with that care. And more importantly, we need to make sure that those new treatments, new approaches, new ways to prevent health, new ways to promote health can really be delivered to everyone in a equitable way, and everyone in a way that they are going to get the optimal benefit. So to answer all of these questions, we have to do research, again, to get to the best possible answer, the most accurate, the best possible picture of the most accurate answer to each of these questions. If we go to the next slide, what I will talk about is, for you, if you are presented with something that is supposedly a recommendation for your health, a recommendation for something that you should do, then there's a few questions that you can ask yourself about how confident you can be in that answer, or how confident you can be in that recommendation. And we call these the 6 R's. So the first one is representation. You want to find out who was actually part of that research. Was it just one owl in the previous example that answered the question? Or were there diverse types of people with diverse types of experiences that could better represent what your experience might be? So that would be one question that you would ask yourself. Who was part of the study? Regulation, Ms. Adler answered that for us earlier, that we want to make sure that this research was actually reviewed and done in an ethical way, done in a way that made sure that people were protected and make sure that people were not in any way misused, misled, or treated in a way that was a lack of respect. And that was a lot about that was discussed last week. And now our regulatory work and our regulatory systems help to ensure that people are safe and protected in research. Next R is replication. Again, this goes back to getting the most accurate answer. Going back to the Tootsie Pop example, if you actually went to the website where the students did these studies, they got all different answers. They got ranges of answers. And so we need to be able to make sure if we did that study more than one time, maybe we do a study 5 times to answer that very question, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? We want to be able to reliably get the same answer, because if you're buying a product, using a product, and it worked for your cousin, but it doesn't work for you, then that product is not reliable, and most likely that the research couldn't replicate that outcome for a number of people. So you want to see how many times was the study done, how many people were exposed to the product or the treatment, to make sure that it really is something that you can count on. The rigor R stands for the work that we do as scientists, and it's on us to really self-monitor ourselves to make sure that we are approaching it in a way that's really going to get a good answer to the question. If we do our work in a haphazard way, we're going to get haphazard results that cannot really be counted upon. Next R is review. This is also part of that rigor. These two go together because while we should police ourselves or should monitor ourselves and our own work and make sure that we're doing our work as efficiently and accurately as possible, we want input from others, and not only other scientists, but people who are going to actually end up using the products that get developed or using or benefiting from the treatments that we're trying to design. So we want review from people who have a lot of expertise in the area, but also we want the review from people who are going to be what we call the end users. And so we need to have those review processes in place. And the last R, I believe, is relevance. And this kind of puts a bookend to representation. Were you or people like you represented in the study? And is this research relevant to your life, to what's important for you? And the question about relevance is, where are we putting our resources, our time, and our dollars? And we want to make sure that we're allocating those resources to the most important questions and the biggest human health problems that we have. And so I just say to people, find an R that's important for you. Is representation the most important? Then make sure that when you're looking at information that people who were part of these research studies represented you. Do you want to make sure that there was a really good review by end users? It's just like seeing the star ratings on any product that you might buy on Amazon. That might be the most important to you. But before you make a decision about using a new product, taking a new treatment, make sure that you've taken a step back to ask yourself about at least one of these R's to see if you are comfortable with the answers that are being provided for you about the product or the treatment. And with that, I think that concludes my contribution, and I will hand it off back to Karen.
Thanks, Dr. Williams. That was very, very clear, very helpful. I wanted to just kind of take a step back because we did just get a lot of information in a few minutes. And I did have a question for actually both you and Ms. Adler, if you would. Given that you both work very closely with research institutions that do serve people from marginalized communities, I wanted to know if you could share a little bit of your perspective about the importance of research in this context. I'll start with you, Dr. Williams.
So in context of the kind of things that you see on the screen, why is research valuable? I think if that's the question that you're asking, Karen, how have we benefited? Why is research valuable? There's some examples here on the screen. So yes, while we don't have the best cure in my work in cancer, we have come a long way. Cancer used to be, people used to really believe that it was a definite death sentence. And now we talk about people living with cancer and when they finally, pass away, it's not from the cancer. So we have come a long way with that. And you can see other examples here, HIV, sickle cell disease, diseases related to brain health and neurology, Alzheimer's being one example. We've made progress. And in some cases, we've made important progress. For example, with sickle cell, there are treatments that can actually reverse sickle cell and actually cure. So now we're at that point in that continuum of, can we make sure that this is replicable and available to everyone? Everyone gets the same benefits and outcomes. But there are some where we still have work to do. And I know from a public engagement perspective, there's the comment of, are we really trying to provide cures? Or are we just trying to provide more medications? But for those who have experienced some of these diseases and now you can live with HIV, whereas again, in the early 80s, and I can remember this time, people thought of it as a definitive death sentence. So I think we all have received some benefits from research.
I see it in the cardiovascular field, where a lot of them have been shown to be more effective in the Black and Brown community than in the white community. And I think that has been a benefit of research for the more vulnerable communities. Also with the HIV, a huge, huge difference from the 80s when that was a death sentence. And just providing the research and the tools for them to take these investigational products and to move them forward and to prove that they were beneficial for that community, I think was a huge research benefit, huge. But that's my perspective.
No, I greatly appreciate that. Thank you. I am going to pause here for just a moment and check in to see if there are any questions from the chat at this point of the discussion. If no, we're just going to have a slight schedule change. I do have in the room right now one of my guests who will be sharing personal perspectives with their experience with clinical research. I give you Ms. Anita Jenkins. Ms. Jenkins, the floor is yours. Hi.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this distinguished conversation. It's a pleasure, and I know we had a brief conversation, so thank you. My conversation, my testimony is a little less clinical and a lot personal. And what I want to say is that research means lives. Research extends lives. Research saves lives. It's so important to understand what you do. I think I just want to start just telling the story. I have one sibling, my big sister, my only sibling, my best friend. And now I was trying to do the math. It's been almost 25 years. And my sister and her husband were expecting their second child. And her pregnancy was going along quite wonderfully, as a matter of fact. And in fact, she was beyond her due date. I'll never forget. And she was quite the dancer, better a dancer than myself. And she was dancing, and it was just wonderful. She was doing well. Went into labor. And as a matter of fact, when it comes to Black and brown communities, we knew she had some hypertension through her pregnancy. We were thinking, is this some preeclampsia? And her symptoms weren't as identified as I know now that they should have been, or could have been, I will say. And she had their second child, and she quickly deteriorated, finding out that she had cardiomyopathy, postpartum cardiomyopathy. She was at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, my hometown. I spent the first decade of my career working at Presbyterian University Hospital, the largest of the hospitals at UPMC. And so those were my stomping grounds. And we knew we had a journey ahead of us with this deteriorating heart of hers. When you start talking about research in cardiac disease, and of course, certainly cardiopulmonary disease, you're going to talk about tools, devices, and medications for the cardiothoracic system. And she was deteriorating. And they tried lots of things for her. And she deteriorated for 7 years. And, with lots of medications and lots of things, what we faced was transplantation. And that was a big decision. It was a big decision. It's a decision for people of color. It was not a thing for me. I had seen successful transplantations. I had been in an OR where we watched and viewed transplantation at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. At the time, was one of the top transplant centers of the world, as a matter of fact. So for me, it wasn't a problem. For her, it was a very big decision. But she deteriorated so significantly and she ended up on the waiting list. The research came in at this point. She needed a biventricular assist device, which was new at the time. And when she got hers, it was literally the size of a washing machine. She was confined to a room. We lived out of town at the time. I had lived in Alabama by now, and I'd lived in Virginia. And she was in the room, and it was just huge. Because of the research and we're talking about devices and research on devices, because of that change, within 2 months while she waited for a transplant, the device improved, and it was the size of a piece of carry-on luggage where she could carry it. And she actually walked an American Heart Association walk down the street. She was the poster child that year. She made the news, and she walked down the street, was doing just fine. She was doing so well. She was at the top of the transplantation list, and was put back lower on the list. Someone was sicker than her, which, we can talk about that all day, which is okay. She ended up with that heart transplant, and they were able to treat her, and she did very, very well, and lived 12 more years. That's research, and that's what you do. And it gave me my sister for an additional 19 years. She and her husband were able to raise their child up and out of high school. She got an infection, and she did pass away 9 years ago. 8 or 9 years ago. And, but I have no regrets. I am so grateful for the researchers and the lab, the medications, everything you do. I know she would not be alive. She would never have been alive that long without research. Now, the twist and turn to that story is that 8 years ago, our oldest child, she and her husband were having their first child. Now, me, I had literally, I hung wallpaper and had natural childbirths, all my children, right? All of my children, I give birth easy as pie. Our oldest child, she and her husband have one child, one and only child. And she too has had cardiomyopathy. So she has a weakened heart. But because of research and because of the new medications that are out, my daughter has a very different outcome. She is on medication probably the rest of her life. Her heart is weakened, but it did not deteriorate like my sister's did. She now is stabilized, and they expect and suspect that she will lead a normal life and have a normal lifespan if she leads a healthy lifestyle because of research. And so for me, when you say the words research, I am all on board. I am excited to hear it. I know that it saves lives, that it sustains lives, and that it works for Black and brown people. My daughter, my oldest daughter with the cardiomyopathy, she and her husband, my oldest daughter is a human resources professional for Indiana University, and has just accepted a new job with Cornell University and is moving to New York in the next month. And so we're talking about Black professionals that are experiencing amazing things. Cornell wants her on board, and so she's shining, and she's alive and well today because of the work that you do. And that's my personal testimony on what research means for people, for human beings, for families, for lives. So that's my story. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I hope that's what you meant when you said, what does research mean to me?
I had to wipe a tear.
Thank you. That's the real deal. That's research, man.
I apologize. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I just needed to breathe a little bit and receive that. Ms. Jenkins is the CEO of our beloved Howard University Hospital. I'm very grateful that you could spend a little time with us this evening and share such a personal story.
And that's why I'm at Howard University Hospital, because I believe, and everybody knows my mantra, that Howard University Hospital should be the top performing hospital in Washington, D.C., and a world-class hospital in the United States. And that's why I'm there to change everything about that hospital so that we can serve in the best way and provide all of the best care to everyone that comes through our doors, for those who are like my daughter, and for those who ever come to our door. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
And that kind of echoes the mantra of our beloved alma mater also, truth and truth
Absolutely.
service, veritas et utilitas. Thank you so much for sharing, Ms.
My
Jenkins.
honor.
Thank you. It looks like we have a lot of people responding in the chat, just thanking you for being so transparent and sharing your story, and thanking you for being a research advocate as well.
My honor. Oh, thank you. I see.
We're going to move on. We do have on the line Mr. Kamon Freeman. He has been a guest with us before. He has some very compelling experiences himself with clinical research. If you are on, Mr. Freeman, the floor is yours.
Peace and blessings. I'm glad to hear that Anita Jenkins had a good experience with healthcare for her sibling. Unfortunately, we didn't have the same experience with my sibling. She was a victim of the sick care system, so I have that in common, that of losing a sibling. So I just want to acknowledge her loss. I was asked to speak about my unique experience as a HIV clinical vaccine trial participant. I have a unique perspective because at that time, AIDS was 12 times the national infection rate in Washington, D.C., 12 times, which again was directly attributed partially to D.C.'s statehood and lack of voter representation. How so? Because the U.S. Congress that controls the district's budget, despite the fact that it's not federal funds, it's DC taxpayer allocated funds, they have a final say of what we do with their funds. That henceforth is taxation without representation. And so they banned the collection, the distribution of needle exchange programs. Nowhere else in the entire United States of America was such a ban in place, but it was in Washington, D.C. Despite the fact that empirical data showed that over a third of all new AIDS infection cases was directly attributed to dirty needles, meaning that for over a decade that this ban was in place, that the AIDS infection rate skyrocketed over 300%.
It looks like we lost Mr. Freeman. You went on mute and then we lost you on video. Are you still there?
I'm still here. I'm sorry. I had a call come in. I should have had blocking my notifications. I apologize for that.
That's all right.
So the thing is that that has led me to be proactive about the AIDS pandemic, because I founded an event called the Black Love Festival, which ultimately became the largest AIDS mobilization in the city for 6 years. We tested more people for AIDS on any given calendar day than the Department of Health. And that's because of my personal experience. I had an aunt and an uncle on different sides of my family die as a part of AIDS. So that is the context of why I was actively participating in the clinical vaccine trial for AIDS pandemic. And what had happened is that a friend of mine, a personal friend of mine, was running the National Institute of Health program. And so because of that relationship, and again, the context that I gave you, I was motivated to participate. Now, when I participated, I had to, also agree to participate in a public advertisement. That means you saw my face on the subway and on buses ads. So I wasn't like doing this in secret, okay? But I was ostracized publicly by friends and family. It damaged the relationship because people was like, "Oh, you selling us out? You trying to get people to participate in being guinea pigs, and you just want to get paid." And all that type of stuff. And what they didn't realize is that this young lady told me something that she quoted from the great philosopher Chris Rock. He said that money is not in the cure, it's in the treatment. Meaning in a capitalistic society, as the young lady said before, the research and all that, that's great, but we cannot omit the reality of the capitalistic economic model in healthcare, when if I gave you a cure, that's a one-time transaction and I never see you again. If I give you a treatment to make you live a little longer, feel a little bit better, and I'm a drug dealer, I got a repeat customer. And that's big pharma. And so she had convinced me that the only way that we was going to see an end for the pandemic of AIDS, that it would have to be a vaccine, because vaccines by law have to be made available to the public, generally for free. And so with that is why I participated. Now, fast forward, I was ostracized by friends and family for participating in a clinical vaccine trial for AIDS, which is still not a cure, still just treatment, not a cure or a vaccine. And it's 40 years into the pandemic, whereas your president just said the COVID pandemic is over, despite the fact America has had more COVID deaths than any country in the entire world and continue to do so in terms of outpacing the number of deaths. That's also because of the capitalism in our sick care system. But having said that, I have not taken the vaccine for COVID. And when I say that, people, like you're one of those people. I'm like, there's a world of difference between being unvaccinated and being anti-vax. Clearly, I'm not anti-vax because I participated in the clinical vaccine trial. So I was ostracized for participating in one clinical vaccine trial, and now I'm being ostracized for not participating in another. And for all intents and purposes, let's not be confused here. This is a clinical vaccine trial. Everyone that's participated is in the clinical vaccine trial. It takes years to develop it. And some people will say, oh, well, this was in the works before and blah, 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 blah. Okay, whatever. The reality is the vast majority and the data that's supposed to go along with it is happening now. Okay, and that's why we continuously see it in updates and changes, and they're trying to keep up with it. So the juxtaposition is I'm being ostracized by friends and family for participating in one clinical vaccine trial. I've been ostracized by the general public for not participating in another. And we need to understand that if there was any real concern about the health of people, we got to also acknowledge the irony, the hypocrisy of, in America, the country that has the most COVID deaths of any other country in the world. They want you to take this vaccine because they care about you. They want to be concerned about your health. They want to get America back on. But if you get sick of anything else, you're on your own. Okay? You get sick of anything else, you're on your own, including the side effects of having COVID. So that is my story in terms of lifting up the confusion and hypocrisy. I'm sorry I had to get the door. I'm in the middle of several things going on. That is the issue I wanted to raise. And then in my closing, let me say this, is that we cannot have an intelligent conversation about healthcare in America without acknowledging this is the only industrialized country in the entire world that does not provide healthcare to all other citizens. That is criminal. And Martin Luther King himself said that there's nothing more brutal than denying healthcare. That's Martin Luther King. I urge everybody to check that quote out, because King got a quote for every issue you can think of. But that has been my unique experience. And I want to make sure that we understand how statehood blends into this Venn diagram, how fear bleeds into this Venn diagram. It was fear of the participation of a clinical vaccine trial that I was ostracized for. It's fear of a disease that I'm getting ostracized for not participating in the clinical vaccine trial. And those politics and capitalism and big pharma is a funky brew that needs to change the ingredients and definitely change the chef, because the cooks that's in this kitchen are not the ones we want to have serving our food, especially in this day and time when we know that they're not concerned about our best interests and heart, health-wise, politically, and otherwise. So that's my story, and I got time to take any question if anyone had something directly at me.
I would say, first of all, I want to thank you for that perspective. Mr. Freeman, it's extremely important that you brought that forward, so I appreciate that. I am checking the time. If I know that you had a commitment as well.
Yeah, I have a community, they're trying to turn my street into a one-way, and I got to testify at an ANC hearing in about 5 minutes, but I can stay on for 5 more minutes.
I understand. We actually will need to move on. In fact, if there are questions that come in your direction, we'd be certain to send those forward to you. I have one of my other special guests this evening who also has a time commitment. And so we need to move on to Dr. Fabian.
Let me say this, Ms. Karen Parker, and to your team, yes. RCMI, thank yes. you for all that you do. This is WEAC Radio. Do something. Stay safe, stay strong, stay woke. Peace.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Peace to you. Do we have Dr. Fabian Sandoval available?
I'm here. I'm taking notes from screen. It's interesting. I'm here.
Hi, Dr. Sandoval. I wanted to make sure that we acknowledged you and kept an eye on time, because we understand that you have a hard stop as well, sir, but thought that it was very important, especially in light of one of the questions that's just popped up in the chat. And as a segue from Mr. Freeman's statements, I wonder if you could give your perspective as a clinical research director here in DC at Emerson Clinical Research Institute, or ECRI. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, those are very interesting points and very good points for us to reflect on us as clinicians, to make sure we always educate our patients the right way. And that's an example, a very good example of when things are done right and when things are done wrong. And more importantly, the way we address them, the way we talk, and the way we explain something to anybody. You know, one of my pet peeves is when I hear someone talking down to somebody else. We are all individuals. We are all humans that need and deserve respect. Titles are important. Some of these titles are address our schooling, our education, our background, but in the end, we all deserve it, the same respect. And part of that respect is understanding and being able to explain what I'm asking someone to take part in. What we do at ECRI is we really do our best to connect with our patients. And how do we do that? Right? In clinical research, we have the luxury that some of my colleagues, physicians, don't have, and that is the luxury of time. We're able to spend time with our patients, really explain what's going on. In most institutions, you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and the next patient's out the door because you have to take care of that one condition, right? Here in research, we are able to really dive deep. And the reason why we dive deep is because we need to understand the entire component of the patient so that we can make that decision together. It is a partnership where us as the scientist and the patient makes that decision together, right? If we want to talk about the Belmont report, right? Beneficence, respect for persons, and justice, right? It couldn't be more true right now, which means in beneficence is be able to give patients what they need. Respect for persons is to talk to them about what's going on, where they can stay in the study or leave. And respect and justice is that a patient should have the ability to leave a study or participate in a study if they have the opportunity. And I know probably Priscilla is back there taking notes because I probably said them out of order, but the concept's the same, right, Priscilla? It's my 3 principles that I need to make sure we all understand. And those principles guide the work that we do every day in our office. And one of the other areas that we have to talk about when we're talking about ethics in this presentation and better know and understand research is that when we are going through this process, why do we work with patients of minority backgrounds? Why do I do it, right? That's my next question as part of ethics. The reason why I do it is because a lot of the times my community does not have the option, is not offered a potential that could benefit them. And it's important to remember they could. It doesn't always, but it could. And we are studying the patient, but we're not just studying the patient, we're also studying the family. And it's important for them to know that because we have to be honest and transparent and say that we're doing something new that may benefit you. You're also gonna get treatments that you may not receive outside of your standard of care because it is not available. Or like Mr. Jenkins was mentioning, they don't have the insurance to cover it. So if all, the nicest thing about the work that we do is that we're able to offer a baseline knowledge for any individual that comes to our office. The other thing that I always make sure we point out is that we don't ask for insurance and we don't ask for your legal status. Why? Because the Hispanic population comes to our office is very concerned about that. So when we talk to them, it is a place where they feel at home. They feel safe and they know that they're going to be respected. And we're going to give them the option to receive new medications. We're doing a very nice uterine fibroid study, right? African-American women, Hispanic women have huge incidence of uterine fibroids. And sometimes there is no other option but surgery. We're trying to identify these women before so that we can give them the proper medication and then give them the mammogram, the DEXA scan, the ultrasound, the transvaginal ultrasounds, because those will do several things for the patient and will let them know their true health. And we don't, if they don't qualify to study based on these, we don't just let them go, right? We work with them to ensure that they have proper follow-up, which is why I decided to also start a community clinic. It's a very small community clinic that is self-sufficient. And our goal is to bring those patients that do two things, that come into us looking for services or that they are done within the clinical trial. So that helps. And we don't bring studies that I don't see a greater benefit to the patient than the risk. Sometimes we don't have that luxury, right? Ms. Williams, as an oncologist, knows, Dr. Williams, I'm sorry, knows that sometimes the risk benefit when it comes to doing oncology research is almost the same. But when there is no other option, we are looking for hope. We're looking for something, we as patients and we as providers. So we do the best as scientists to give the patients the best thing. And the other reason why we push this forward is because we do have IRBs that don't give us a study unless it is properly and ethically reviewed and approved, right? So once we have a good IRB review board that comes to us, we're able to safely say, we're giving the best foot forward to the patients and giving them an option that honestly, if we weren't there to tell them about it, they would have no idea. We're doing a diabetic macular edema study right now. The amount of diabetes that's in our community is gigantic. And the amount of people that are going blind because of it is just as big, but they don't know that there's a problem with their vision until they're lucky enough to come to one of our catchment areas where we can say, you're diabetic, let's do a screening and let's check the back of your eye. Let's look at your retina because a regular patient's not going to know that that's where the problem lies. And if we identify it in time, we're going to put them in the study. That's a $2,000 medication that they're going to receive for an entire year and a half, almost in cases it's 2 years. So that's 50, 60, almost $100,000 in some cases for these studies, which yes, we are identifying the patients, but once again, the value to the patient is always there. And most importantly is that we give the patients the key that when they don't feel that they're safe and they're comfortable, they can always come out of the study. But it is our job to make sure that they know they have rights. It's our job to make sure we tell them this is going to help, and it's also going to help our community, because my last point is, if our Black and brown patients do not participate in research, when this medication comes out, it may not work for us. And that is a problem. That is a huge problem because we need to make sure it works for everybody. Our rainbow, as I always say, our rainbow of gene pool is mixing quite a bit. And if we don't have a good mix of those patients who participate, we're going to have a huge population that receives it. 50% of it works out, and the other 50% of us are going to have to cross our hands and say, well, we didn't participate, so now the medication doesn't work. So it is our responsibility to also secure the future of health for our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that perspective. I do have, I'm checking the time at 7:26. I have one question in the chat, if I could just hand it over to you. It's coming in from Ms. Adler. How would you handle under or uninsured individuals who may have an adverse event or an injury that is not related to the research?
So we're able to work with the community hospitals, and we're able to bring them within. We have established partnerships with specialists that are able to see our patients at a much lower cost. That's a great question, Ms. Adler. And the other thing I should also mention, speaking of education, we have a TV show. I have to give a plug to our TV show. We have a TV show that airs every Saturday morning on Telemundo. So if you guys know Spanish or want to practice your Spanish, please turn on at 11:30 a.m. in the DC area, Telemundo, and it's called Tu Salud, Tu Familia, Your Health, Your Family. And we talk about every single health disease out there. And half of my panelists on here, I'm going to end up interviewing, even if you don't speak Spanish, because I'm doing voiceovers, because it's important for us to educate our community. And we've done so well that we have won 3 Emmys in the last 3 years that we have been on air. So we're doing something right to educate our people.
Am I still muted? Thank you for your perspective. Thank you for your time. I understand that you have a call time for another interview. So we appreciate the time that you spent with us and the descriptions of experiences that you've given for your research and your advocacy for our community. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to put our shows in the chat box so you guys can see the TV show.
We appreciate that. We will share that as well widely. I'm checking on time, everyone. It's about 7:28, and we do have one other very important perspective to share. I understand if you have to sign off, but we do have Dr. Tracy Faulkner, who also has some perspectives with regard to her experience with clinical trials. And so without any further delay, I give you Dr. Faulkner. Dr. Faulkner, I think you're on mute.
I apologize. Yes, I was. Okay. Hi, thank you, Ms. Parker. Good evening to everyone. So am I working with 2 minutes, Ms. Parker?
Please continue as long as you need.
Okay. Well, I've actually had the opportunity to actually be a part of clinical trials as a patient and as a provider. I am a licensed pharmacist. However, I'd like to share a few testimonials with you, and I'll be as quick as possible. One was when I was in pharmacy school, they were always looking for participants to be healthy subjects when they were investigating or determining if a drug was going to be developed for a particular disease state. So there were opportunities that I actually was able to contribute to what we know about the sciences being a healthy subject. So what that meant essentially was I was either placebo, meaning I didn't actually receive the drug, but they wanted to compare my readings to that of someone that may have been ill with a particular illness. And actually that was fine. And then as a pharmacist, I've actually been one of the persons that say you have a patient that's very ill with a condition and there are no cures, quote unquote. However, we have something called compassionate use, which you've heard a lot with coronavirus. But at one point I was working with the National Cancer Institute, and you would have physicians call in and say, we have this patient with terminal cancer, and we'd like to try, we know that there's this drug that we currently is in clinical trials, and we'd like to use this for our patient as sort of like a last option. So having to make the decisions with a group of physicians about, yes, we think that this would be an excellent choice for this person, an option for this person, or no, their labs are, this drug may be detrimental to them. So the answer is no. And on a personal note, I am happy to celebrate 6 years from having a brain aneurysm rupture. And if anyone doesn't know what that is, essentially our blood vessels are like tubes. And I had some blood vessels that actually had little bubbles on the side, which we're not supposed to have. And one of those burst. And as a result, I had something that's called like a hemorrhagic stroke or a brain bleed. And I am fortunate to have celebrated surviving. Where my brain aneurysm was, or one of them, was in my brainstem. And that's a part of the brain that controls all of our involuntary movements. So things that happen and we don't even realize, like our heartbeat, our breathing, our sleeping, nausea, and vomiting. And it occurred. I was medevaced to a major neurological intensive care unit. And the doctor says, well, we have good news and we have bad news. And I said, okay, well, the good news is I'm still alive and I can talk with you. So I said, what is the bad news? He says, well, you have not only blown out your brainstem, but most people don't talk when that happens. So it's a miracle that you're alive. And you also have other brain aneurysms. So my response to that was, okay, can you fix it? And they said, well, it's going to be a challenge for us, but I had faith in them. And I said, I know that you'll figure out what you need to do. So the physicians actually had to consult with neurosurgeons around the globe about my particular case. And there's actually been a case report written. So I'm actually anonymously listed in clinical journals about my survival from that brain aneurysm. And also, so that's one clinical trial that I participated in. Also, I do not know my paternal or the history of my father. So there was a study advertised actually on WHUR about 5 years ago. It was called the Gene Forecast Study. And essentially it was looking to find out, are there any genetic components? Do we have any genes that actually may identify people of color for having certain cardiovascular or heart disease? So I actually participated in that trial. They drew lots of blood. I actually had a really extensive study of my heart history and my own cardiovascular system. And I actually did not have some of the genes that they were looking for, specifically for African Americans. So again, because I know my history of my mother's health and her family, I didn't know of my father, so I made a choice to become a part of the study so I could find out more about my own potential medical history. And my last is, having had a brain aneurysm, I decided to become a patient for medical students. So there are two medical schools where I'm actually a patient when students are studying neurology or the nervous system. And I actually talk about my story, and then I'm actually evaluated by students so that they learn how to ask questions to patients such as myself, and that I'm a rare or a miracle survivor. I also participate in trials with an occupational therapy school here in this area. And I talk about my story, but also I'm involved in what are called Neuropsych Analysis. So this is when you probably hear with Alzheimer's or other memory disorders, they sort of give you questions, they ask you questions, and then they'll ask you about 30 minutes later what they just talked about. They test your memory. A lot of extensive testing. And the reason I decided to become a part of that trial was because of the brain injury that I suffered. And I wanted students to know actually that we're human beings and they have a chance to actually interact with someone who is a healthcare professional who's also been a patient that suffered a brain injury. And I also participated in a wellness study to find out my risk of certain diseases. Again, I think a lot of my decisions have made because I just want to know, and I having had experience as a healthcare provider, wanting to be on both sides of the bed is what I like to say. So again, for those of you that have not had such great experiences, I'm sending you hugs regarding those. And I hope that if I'm ever in interactions with any of you or anyone in a clinical trial that you receive, that you are informed and you feel very empowered to be a part of a trial that helps science as well as helps you with your own health history. And thank you for all of those that have participated today and all that you do. And to Ms. Jenkins, a round of applause and praise for your family. And I'm glad to know that they're doing well. Thank you, Ms. Parker, for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Faulkner. And I'm noting that there's a commentary in the chat actually from Ms. Jenkins, and I'm sure that she's echoing not just her sentiments, but the sentiments of quite a few of us on this call listening to your story. You are, in fact, a miracle. Full disclosure, I have known Dr. Faulkner for more than half my life. We started out at Howard University together, and you are a testament to your field. You are a testament to womanhood. You're a testament to resiliency. And I just want to thank you for agreeing to share your story with us this evening. It looks like we have a raised hand from Ms. Barrientos. If you're able to come on mic, please do.
Yes, I would agree with Ms. Parker. Thank you so much, Dr. Faulkner. That was incredibly inspiring. And as Ms. Jenkins said, you certainly are a walking miracle. I guess my question to you, and if Ms. Jenkins is still available, how have you dealt, personally with the maybe the doubts or the fears that could come with the risks that are involved in clinical research? I think that's largely what holds a lot of people back. They don't necessarily see the benefit of it right away. And, you hear about that one person or two people that had adverse effects.
Ms. Jenkins likes to go first, so I can. Well, for me, I think my decisions are based on just the knowledge that I've had and experience with working with other scientists. All the trials of which I've been now, I will also admit that there have been clinical trials of which I was excluded. I wasn't eligible to participate. So I really do my research on the trial. And I always go with an open mind that there's maybe something that I can contribute to the science as well. And I have not experienced fear. That's not to say that maybe in the future, if I'm looking at a clinical trial, looking at the risk, and at that particular moment, I would have to make a decision as to whether I would participate or not. And sometimes you just have to go with your gut. Do you think this is the best decision for me? Or, how is this going to affect my family and my friends? If it were a decision such as that, I would definitely have to have some conversations with other people. And then, of course, I make the final decision. But again, we live with risk every day, just living. And again, everyone isn't able to participate in trials, and there are lots of reasons for that, and there's no judgment about that. But there are some, that are, and we're able to do that. So there's no judgment at all, and there's so much that we can learn.
Thank you so much. It's really helpful.
Thank you for that. It looks like we have one more question in the chat, and then I think we'll be closing out our discussion for this evening. But if Ms. Holmes is available to come on mic, could you ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Faulkner, for sharing your experiences. I just wanted to ask, for each of these, did you feel during the informed consent process that you were well informed and also respected? I know sometimes that can be a barrier, that, you know, just making sure people understand and not just understand, but feel seen as a person and not kind of used as for just the experiment. But I just wanted to know if you had good experiences with that process.
Hey, thank you, Ms. Holmes, for your question. Actually, I felt quite informed, and I will admit that I'm a person that reads every detail. So in the instance of some consent forms, I've asked to receive them prior to the actual enrollment, or because I will read and people will see that I circle words and I read every line in the consent form. And I share this with patients all the time. Like when you go to a doctor, or you know, they want to give you a consent form, could you please sign here? And I'll say, after I diligently read this, and if I have any questions, may I please ask those? So sometimes people get frustrated with me, but again, once you sign, you're consenting to be a participant or allowed, you know, you are saying, I agree for you to perform this procedure, and I'm aware of the benefits as well as the risk of it. So once you sign, you know, you have to understand that it's a document, you know. So no, I'm not afraid. Yes, people have been very frustrated with me, but again, it is my life, and I'm the one that's making the decision about whether I am to receive this care or contribute to science. I hope that answers your question, Ms. Holmes. And if you need me to elaborate more, I will gladly.
It does. Thank you very much.
Indeed, a pleasure.
We also have a comment actually coming up from Dr. Williams. She unfortunately had to go off mic and wanted to make sure that this perspective was shared. She says, for any healthcare decision, we have the goal for people to have the best information to make the best informed choice for themselves. And this may be in consultation with providers and other trusted individuals. So I would summarize that to underscore the point of informed consent. It's not just a piece of paper. Right. It's a process and a conversation. Yes. And as Ms. Adler pointed out earlier, at any time, and also Dr. Sandoval, that because it is informed consent, there is always a piece in there that assures the participant that at any time they can, as they granted their consent, it can be withdrawn as well. And you can say, that's it. And it is up to the person who is participating, who is advocating for themselves, to make sure that they communicate such with their research doc, because safety is a priority. You don't just drop out of a study. There are sometimes situations where you have to work very closely with your research doc to make sure that when you end your relationship with the study, that that's done safely as well.
Yes.
Indeed. Well, it looks like Mr. Bridgewater has some kudos also for you, Dr. Faulkner. He's asking, he's thanking you for sharing your story and testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Bridgewater. I wish you all stay safe, stay well, and informed.
Absolutely. Actually, just noting that Mr. Bridgewater did lose his brother while he was waiting for brain surgery. So we want to extend our condolences on that loss. As we round out this fascinating discussion this evening, I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that Here at RCMI, we actually have an active study ongoing as well. It is not invasive. It's the opportunity to participate in a survey. And by virtue of your being a part of this conversation with us this evening, each of you on this call is invited to consider participating with us. So after the event, we will send some follow-up information with an invitation to participate on this survey. And the point of the study is to help us understand what's important about life beyond COVID-19. So everyone on this call is potentially eligible to participate. You don't have to have contracted COVID, but certainly we have all been affected and influenced, I would say, by the experience that we've all shared over the past couple of years. And as you can see on our announcement here, it's up to 2 online surveys. It takes about 30 minutes apiece. There is a compensation option up to $100. And the reason that we are doing this study is to find the best ways to share new information, because as Mr. Freeman pointed out, it's about also updating people when there's new information available. And we need you as the participant, excuse me, to let us know what's important to you about life beyond COVID. So we will send forward that information after this call. And that brings us to the end of our presentation this evening. Thank you so much for sticking with us. As on behalf of our team here at RCMI Howard University, thank you very much to those of you who stayed with us. We did go a little bit over time. We apologize for that, but it was such a robust conversation. Thank you to our guests who shared their stories and perspectives, our production partners, and everyone on this call for your time and feedback. We are recording this video. It will be posted on YouTube. And thank you very much. And we will hear from our colleague, Kristen, as we close out.
Thank you so much to everyone on this call for your participation. We are now at the end of this session. Please make sure that you register for the last topic in our Ethics and Research series next week, Tuesday's implicit bias session using the code on screen. When you leave the call, a very short survey will pop up. Please take a moment to give your feedback. Finally, please follow up with rcmi-cec@howard.edu or add your information to the chat to join our mailing list to keep up with our programming. We wish you all a safe and mindful walk until next time. Good night.